Good morning and welcome to Tuesday morning story time here live at the Lewis County Public Library. We are so glad that you're able to tune in and join us today, and we hope that you had a great 4th of July weekend. With 4th of July in mind, this week we're going to be reading some American tall tales. Now, a tall tale is a story that started out as a true story, but as people told it and retold it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And usually there's some piece of truth still in the tall tale, but a lot of it is exaggerated or made bigger and just a little bit unbelievable. So, part of Lewis County's tall tale connection is that there are people that say that Johnny Appleseed, the star of our first book today, came and planted trees, or that there were trees planted in Lewis County that came from Johnny Appleseed. So let's hear his story. This is Johnny Appleseed, a tall tale retold and illustrated by Stephen Kellogg. John Chapman, who later became known as Johnny Appleseed, was born on September 26, 1774, when the apples on the trees surrounding his home in Leominster, Massachusetts, were as red as the autumn leaves. John's first years were hard. His father left the family to fight in the Revolutionary War, and his mother and baby brother died before his second birthday. By the time John turned 6, his father had remarried and settled in Longmeadow, Massachusetts. Within a decade, their little house was overflowing with 10 more children. Nearby was an apple orchard. Like most early American families, the Chapmans picked their apples in the fall, stored them in the cellar for winter eating, and used them to make sauces, cider, vinegar, and apple butter. John loved to watch the spring blossoms slowly turn into glowing fruit of autumn. Watching the apples grow inspired in John a love of all nature. He often escaped from his boisterous household to the tranquil woods. The animals sensed a gentleness and trusted him. As soon as John was old enough to leave home, he set out to explore the vast wilderness to the west. When he reached the Allegheny Mountains, he cleared a plot of land and planted a small orchard with the pouch of apple seeds he carried with him. John walked hundreds of miles through the Pennsylvania forest, living like the Indians he befriended on the trail. As he traveled, he cleared the land for many more orchards. He was sure the pioneer families would be arriving before long, and he looked forward to supplying them with apples. When a storm struck, he found shelter in a hollow log or built a lean-to. On clear nights, he stretched out under the stars. Over the next few years, John continued to visit and care for his new orchards. The winter slowed him down, but he survived happily on a diet of butternuts. One spring, he met a band of men who boasted that they could lick their weight in wildcats. They were amazed to hear that John wouldn't hurt an animal and had no use for a gun. They challenged John to compete at wrestling, their favorite frontier sport. He suggested a more practical contest, a tree chopping match. The woodsman eagerly agreed. Oh my goodness! Look at all those men chopping down trees. There must have been sawdust going everywhere. When the sawdust settled, there was no question about who had come out on top. John was pleased to see that the land for his largest orchard had been so quickly cleared. He thanked the exhausted woodsmen for their help and began planting. During the next few years, John continued to move westward. Whenever he ran out of apple seeds, he hiked to the eastern cider presses to replenish his supply. Before long, John's plantings were spread across the state of Ohio. Meanwhile, pioneer families were arriving in search of home sites and farmland. John had located his orchards on the routes he thought they'd be traveling. As he'd hoped, the settlers were eager to buy his young trees. John went out of his way to lend a helping hand to his new neighbors. Often he would give his trees away. People affectionately called him Johnny Appleseed, and he began using that name. He particularly enjoyed entertaining children with tales of his wilderness adventures and stories from the Bible. In 1812, the British incited the Indians to join them in another war against the Americans. The settlers feared that Ohio would be invaded from Lake Erie. It grieved Johnny that his friends were fighting each other, but when he saw the smoke of burning cabins, he ran through the night, shouting a warning at every door. After the war, people urged Johnny to build a house and settle down. He replied that he lived like a king in his wilderness home, and he returned to the forests he loved. During his long absences, folks enjoyed sharing their recollections of Johnny. They retold his stories, and sometimes they exaggerated a bit. Some recalled Johnny sleeping in a treetop hammock and chatting with the birds. Others remembered that a rattlesnake had attacked his foot. Fortunately, Johnny's feet were as tough as elephant's hide, so the fangs didn't pierce his skin. It was said that Johnny had tended a wounded wolf and kept him for a pet. An old hunter swore he'd seen Jolly frolicking with a bear family. The storytellers outdid each other with tall tales about his feats of survival in the untamed wilderness. Look at all the different stories they tell. Oh, that's a big fish. Do you think his boat got swallowed up by that fish? As the years passed, Ohio became too crowded for Johnny. He moved to the wilds of Indiana, where he continued to clear land for his orchards. When the settlers began arriving, Johnny recognized some of the children who had listened to his stories. Now they had children of their own. It made Johnny's old heart glad when they welcomed him as a beloved friend and asked to hear his tales again. When Johnny passed 70, it became difficult for him to keep up his work. Then, in March of 1845, while trudging through a snowstorm near Fort Wayne, Indiana, he became ill for the first time in his life. Johnny asked for shelter in a settler's cabin, and a few days later, he died there. Curiously, Johnny's stories continued to move westward without him. Folks maintained they'd seen him in Illinois, or they'd greeted him in Missouri, Arkansas, or Texas. Others were certain that he'd planted trees on the slopes of the Rocky Mountains or in California's distant valleys. Even today, people still claim they've seen Johnny Appleseed. The end. Well, now it's time to do the song we do every Tuesday morning. So get your hands loosey-goosey. We're going to sing The More We Get Together. Are you ready? The more we get together, 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 the more we get together, the happier we'll be. 'Cause your friends are my friends and my friends are your friends. The more we get together, the happier we'll be. The more we read together, 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 the more we read together, the happier we'll be. 'Cause your books are my books and my books are your books. The more we read together, the happier we'll be. Good job, good job. Okay, now we're gonna sing Bingo. There was a farmer, had a dog, and Bingo was his name. Oh, B-I-N-G-O, 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 and Bingo was his name. Oh, there was a farmer, had a dog, and Bingo was his name. dog, and Bingo was his name-o. N-G-O, 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 and Bingo was his name-o. There was a farmer had a dog, and Bingo was his name-o. G-O, 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 and Bingo was his name-o. There was a farmer had a dog, and Bingo was his name-o. Oh, 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 and Bingo was his name-o. There was a farmer had a dog, and Bingo was his name-o. And Bingo was his name-o. Good job, good job. Now we're going to read one of my favorite American tales. This is John Henry, an American legend. Story and pictures by Ezra Jack Keats. A hush settled over the hills. The sky swirled soundlessly around the moon. The river stopped murmuring. The wind stopped whispering, and the frogs and the owls and the crickets fell silent, all watching and waiting and listening. Then the river roared. The wind whispered and whistled and sang. The frogs croaked, the owls hooted, and all the crickets chirped. Welcome, welcome, echoed through the hills. And John Henry was born with a hammer in his hand. Bang, 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 rang little John Henry's hammer through the cabin as he crawled about. What's that rascal up to now? His mother chuckled, and before she knew it, he was big enough to help her around the house. As he grew up, he did a man's work with his father. One day, John Henry thought, I'm taller and stronger than anyone around. It's time I went into the world. So he said goodbye to his mother and father, and off he went. He worked on farms and in cotton fields, but that was all too tame. So he got a job on a riverboat. One stormy night, the ship plowed through the darkness. Suddenly, the big steel rod that turned the paddle wheel broke. The wheel stopped turning. Smash went the rod through the bottom of the ship. Pump water, shouted the captain. Get to port before we sink. John Henry leaped to the paddle wheel crank. He seized it, pushed, and grunted and pulled. Slowly the giant wheel turned. With all his strength he kept it turning. Lord Almighty, help us, someone whispered in that long, dark night. As day broke, they sighted shore and pulled into port. A thunderous cheer went up for John Henry. John Henry felt a new excitement in the air. Men were talking of railroads being built from the Atlantic to the Pacific. They're going to lay those tracks over rivers, across prairies and deserts, right through the mountains, and through Indian lands and stampeding buffalo herds and badlands. Goodbye, boys, cried John Henry. I'm going to swing me a hammer on them beautiful new tracks. My hands are just itching to hold the hammer again, John Henry said. He tried one for size and laughed. It sure does feel fine. How he drove those spikes, singing to the clanging of his hammer. The men joined in, their voices singing, hammers ringing, and John Henry's gang was in the lead. As day after day the tracks moved steadily westward. Rising across their path was a sprawling mountain range. Its snow-capped peaks reached high into the clouds. We'll have to tunnel through, said his friend, Little Bill. It'll be awfully dangerous. Could be cave-in, someone put in. That suits me just fine, said John Henry. Me too, added Little Bill. Here's how we'll do it, boys, the foreman called out. A couple of men will drive a hole into the rock. Then the powder men will put dynamite into the hole and explode it. The others will cart the loose rock away. We'll do this again and again until we have a tunnel right through this mountain. And it's going to be a real big tunnel, boys. Big enough for a giant locomotive pulling one of them long strings of trains. All right, boys, blast away. Deep into the mountain they worked as John Henry's singing echoed through the tunnel. The powder men got ready to blast more rock. They filled a hole with dynamite, put in a long fuse, and lit it. "Run, men!" cried the foreman. They all scrambled back, ready to dash clear of the blast. At that instant came a great crackling and rumbling, and the entire tunnel trembled around them. "It's a cave-in! We're trapped!" There was no place to run. The fuse burned closer to the dynamite. John Henry was nearest the fuse. He ran to put it out, but tripped and fell. "Oh, I'm hurt bad," he groaned. "I can't get up." The fuse burned farther out of reach. Others rushed toward it, but they were too far away. Suddenly, John Henry remembered he still had his hammer in his hand. Down came the hammer, smack on the burning tip. The fuse was out. Danger past. Sighs of relief filled the smoky tunnel. "Help me up, boys," mumbled John Henry. Clearing their way through the cave-in, the men carried him to safety. Some days later, they heard an unfamiliar clatter. Down the tunnel came a group of men of a strange machine. "This is a steam drill. It can drill more holes faster than any 6 men combined," a new man bragged. "Who can beat that?" John Henry stepped forward. "Try me." He and Little Bill took their workplaces. John Henry gripped his hammer. Little Bill clutched his steel drill. "Check the machine," came an order. A nervous hand fell on the switch. In the dark, both sides waited for the signal to start. A hoarse voice counted, 1, 2, 3. The machine shrieked as it started. John Henry swung his hammer, and a crash of steel on steel split the air. Clang! Bang! Clang! The drill got red hot in Little Bill's hands. He quickly dropped it and picked up another. Hiss! Whistle! Rattle! Men frantically heaved coal into the hungry, roaring engine and poured water into the steaming boiler. Whoop! Clang! Whoop! Bang! John Henry's hammer whistled as he swung it. Chug! Chug! Clatter! Rattled the machine. Hour after hour raced by. The machine was ahead. "Hand me that 20-pound hammer, Little Bill." Harder, faster crashed the hammer. Great chunks of rock fell as John Henry ripped hole after hole into the tunnel wall. The machine rattled and whistled and drilled even faster. Friends doused John Henry and Little Bill with cold water to keep them going. Then John Henry took a deep breath and picked up 2 sledgehammers and sang, "Ain't no hammer strike such fire, strike such lightning, Lord, and I won't tire. Hammers like this, Lord, there's never been. I'll keep swinging them, Lord, until we win." John Henry swung both mighty hammers, faster and faster. He moved so fast the men could only see a blur and sparks from his striking hammers. His strokes rang out like great heartbeats. At the other side of the tunnel, the machine shrieked, groaned, and rattled and drilled. Then, all at once, it shook and shuddered, wheezed, and stopped. Frantically, men worked to get it going again, but they couldn't. It had collapsed. John Henry's hammering still rang and echoed through the tunnel with a strong and steady beat. Suddenly, there was a great crash. Light streamed through the dark tunnel. John Henry had broken through. Wild cries of joy burst from the men. Still holding one of his hammers, John Henry stepped out into the glowing light of a dying day. It was the last step he ever took. Even the great heart of John Henry could not bear the strain of his last task. John Henry died with this hammer in his hand. If you listen to the locomotives roaring through the tunnels and across the land, you'll hear them singing that great steel-driving man, John Henry. Listen. The end. And that was the story of John Henry. Now let's sing one more song. This old man, he played one. He played knick-knack on my thumb with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played two. He played knick-knack on my shoe with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played three. He played knick-knack on my knee with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played four. He played knick-knack on my door with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played five. He played knick-knack on a hive with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played six. He played knick-knack on some sticks with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played seven. He played knick-knack up in heaven with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played eight. He played knick-knack on a gate with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played nine. He played knick-knack on a line with the knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played 10. He played knick-knack again and again with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. Good job, good job. I hope you all can come by the library sometime this week. We have a video up on our Facebook page showing you how to make this, a tortoise and the hare story wheel kit. So you can pick up one of these kits at the library and then watch the video to see how it's made. So come by and pick one of those up today while supplies last. And don't forget, there is still time to sign up for our summer reading program. So you can go to the website or download the READsquared app, and we hope that you'll work with us to make our story Happily Ever Hohenwald. But for now, goodbye, friends. Goodbye, friends. Goodbye, friends. It's time to say goodbye. Goodbye, my friends. See you next time.